They're possible. They are absolutely possible. Not just possible, but probable if you put the work in. So, you are listening to ECR, Effra Community Radio, and this is Breaking Boundaries. This is the show where we, collectively, the collective we, not the royal we, not from Buckingham, Cape, what I said, Bon Buckingham. Yeah, not the royal we, but the collective we explore things, phenomena from current affairs, popular culture, relationship dynamics, and behavior psychology. This is a great day. It's already been written. We're feeling good. We're feeling empowered. There's a lot going on in the news, in the current affairs, the world of current affairs. Is Britain going for a crisis right now? I dare say not. It's business as usual. We know the games. Same old games. There's a phrase I'm looking for. Same wine in a different bottle.
Topics addressed in today's program may deal with sensitive issues. For example, struggles with mental health, structural racism, sexual behavior, or politically polarizing themes. Listener discretion is advised. The views and opinions expressed in this program are those of the speakers, commentators, experts, guests, or host. They do not explicitly or necessarily reflect the channel's policy or founding principles. ECR cannot be held accountable for all or any views expressed.
And I absolutely request that you hit the follow button on the Breaking Boundaries Facebook page, and that you are invited to follow me on Twitter, X, on TikTok or Instagram, on IG at Hugh Mayers, HUGHMAYERS, and also on YouTube. There are so many interesting conversations, and you can pick up the opinions, the perspectives, and the analysis of the callers from the excerpts that are on YouTube, which is Hugh Mayers TV, HUGHMAYERS. So like I said, we got a power pack show in store for you today, and there's a few things to cover in the news. But yeah, from the world of entertainment, we take a little diversion and a little excursion. The lady that created the mobiles, that put her own money up, has passed away, and it's history. It's since the 90s, since the actual 1990s, that this lady has the legacy goes back to Kenya King. Yeah, she died at the age of 57 years old, actually. It was, I believe, on Wednesday the 3rd. So just this week, the mobile founder, Kenya King, passed away. She has been remembered by those who really appreciated her work as a visionary, one that changed black culture. King worked tirelessly to champion black music and musicians' contribution to British culture, and funded the first Music of Black Origins Awards way back in 1996. That's 30 years, man. Out of her own pocket. She died on Wednesday after a courageous and characteristically determined battle with colon cancer. And the tributes have been coming in left, right, and center. Alicia Dixon called King an incredible woman, and then she helped so many people, and her impact is immeasurable. Stormzy posted a heart and dove emojis, while Sir Idris Elba said she was gone way too soon. And JLS star Ortiz Williams said She was a pioneer who had created a powerful platform and championed cultures, communities, and talent that were often unseen and underrepresented, despite our cultural influence being felt across the world. And Williams added that she didn't just create opportunity, she created belief in our culture, our creativity, and our potential. You know, she's an absolute icon of sort. So just wanted to give her her flowers and the acknowledgement. Shout out to the family. Kenya King, condolences to the family, should I say, not shout out, excuse me. Condolences to the family. And yeah, she will be missed by many, and you know, what a legacy. And I like the idea of being a trailblazer, of being able to, you know, go out on a limb and move beyond the fear of failure, the thing that holds so many people from our community back, stops us from accessing our genius, is that fear of, you know, what happens if it goes wrong? I better not try because I could fail and that would be beyond bearable. No, man, we try, we crash and burn, and like the phoenix, we rise from the ashes, man, and we come again, you know, the symbolism of that. So yeah, shout out to all the musicians that were able to platform, you know, from the mobos and gain recognition and further push the craft and push the art.
Breaking Boundaries Talk Show with your host, Hugh Mayers. Sometimes controversial, often provocative, but always informative. You can call in to ask a question or share your opinion on 0782-611-5543.
And I have a message from the Breaking Boundaries backroom staff, and it is for Mr. Lacey Vibes regarding the public communications system that they hope that it is in place. And, you know, everything's going to be all right if that's in place, and we're going to get there. We're going to get there as a people, most definitely. But yeah, plenty of food for thought, plenty of food for reflection, and plenty of time for good conversation.
Kun fire kun. Be and it is. Before there was anything, there was nothingness. A state in which physical things could exist. Atoms of matter attract like magnets and vibrate at speeds of cosmic gases, slowed down as if by magic to form planets. Housing minerals, alkalis and acids, divine designs, never planned in panic. Pacific, Atlantic, Oceanic, abundant seas, shifted land masses, fertile plains to terrains that are jagged, sulfur springs fed by active volcanics. Behold, the earth man inhabits, a whirl of good things for a man to manage, raised up out of the ashes, in the Garden of Eden between where Ethiopia and Iraq is. That land is where the foundation, civilization, and origination of man is. Who could have planned it better from first to last letter? Only the Alpha and Omega. Now look at how we living. Something's missing. Trying our best to reconnect with lost traditions. Lack of vision, lost our position. Man talk, but how many man really listen to the vibration and the rhythm of the all true and living that dwells within them? In the valley of decision is bare schism. Understand that the application of knowledge is wisdom, and be wise by the millions. On a grand scale, make moves on knowledge, not superstition. Real and unreal, fact and fiction. If you claim to know the truth, then don't mix them. False prophet prediction, why listen? None knows the time of the final cataclysm. I know what I'ma do for ease the pressure. I'ma love life, learn to love all of you and live better. Come on! Now check the time and relative dimensions in space, and all eyes embrace the contours of my face. And observe the unknown stone, skin and bone, physical abode that my soul calls home. Leap into action with a passion. Shake off yesterday's dirt and make tomorrow happen right now. Demons I and I fight down, pipe down. Listen, I need quiet now. Because if given free reign, it's our minds they run. We're born intelligent and raised to be dumb. So each one, teach one, and make us free from the sins of jinns cast from the Garden of Eden. Till kingdom come, They've gone with our kingdoms, civilizations built on black wisdom. Black Muslim, black Jew, black Christian, man and melanin transcend religion. Scattered descendants of black Egyptians, the light of knowledge shine from a black existence. Black renaissance to black resistance, go further in distance to make a difference.
Shout out to my broski. I am Shahid, dropping a little bit of freestyle knowledge for the peeps. So yeah, wanted to lay the table as I do with a little bit of reflection related to anti-black racism. You may be asking, there's so much going on in the news at the moment, and there's a race storm of sort going on in the UK. But as has been the case in recent times, that this year, there's been quite a few storm clouds brewing in terms of British identity and arguments related to that sphere. But quite often, nothing to do with black people. But black people's getting drawn out or drawn in, depending on how you perceive it. Like Kemi Badenoch with the statement, if the black churches were getting attacked like synagogues, it would be a national outcry. And as a black woman, she can't believe it. Drawing black people into it. Nothing to do with the situation. Recently, murder case concluded, and somehow no black person was involved in the case, but Black Lives Matter is getting drawn into the conversation. So what it seems to be on the surface, although there are many different ethnicities in the UK and people from different racial backgrounds that come, settle, have citizenship, are British, for want of a better word, at least legally. I know some of you might find that problematic. Some of you of the darker melanated hue might find that a bit problematic, but at least on your passport or your paperwork, it says British, right? But nonetheless, like Animal Farm, we're all equal, right? But what's the line? But some are more equal than others, right? So there's always this, all right, the black boogeyman is always in the background, but I just wanted to set the table with something from the school of psychoanalysis, looking through that lens of talking therapy and psychotherapy, known as psychoanalysis, right? Which talks about unconscious drives. It focuses a lot on unconscious drives and unconscious processes, right? There's an idea that anti-black racism, right, through the school of psychoanalysis, is understood as an unconscious psychic structure that protects white identity. Oh, okay. Can you please excuse me for the absence of the volume? I'm going to project my voice. I'm going to punch this one out differently. Yeah, so I hope you can hear me clearly. I wanted to take a quick look at the idea of anti-black racism through the lens of psychoanalysis. Anti-black racism through the psychoanalytic lens is best understood as an unconscious psychic structure that protects white identity by projecting fear, guilt, and disowned desires onto black people, right? It's not simply prejudice. It's a psychological system that organizes fantasies, emotion, and power, right? Below is a structure, deep explanation of the systems that operate to keep this thing in place. Because I want you to bear in mind the comments of Nasty Nigel. They're focused in a particular way, but there's something called a pivot, right? When you pivot, and you can turn direction at any moment. The pivot is important because the main focus in recent years has been Pakistani grooming gangs when it comes to identity politics and questions of who's British and men from cultures who may have different values to ours in England and stuff like that. That's been a conversation. But if we, the I, remember, keep in mind, you know, our history of 40, 50, 60 years in this country, coming up to date, yeah, it doesn't take a lot. It was only in August 2024 when we had the Farage riots that the picture of a black young man as public enemy number 1 was on screen. And Farage, Nasty Nigel came out and said, you know, he does what he does. And he does it very well, to be fair to him, right? But we think something's been hidden from us. We're not being told the complete truth. And he whipped up the knuckle draggers and it kicked off. So we, at the I, always have to keep in mind, even when we're not the main headline in the race argument in the UK or the discussion related to identity politics, it's just a pivot. We're only a second away, or we're always in the room, figuratively and literally. Yeah, projection. The white psyche offloads what it cannot bear. Psychoanalysis argues that people split off parts of themselves they find unacceptable: aggression, desire, envy, and project them onto others. Think about those things in particular. How black people, black men in particular, at times have been categorized, right, as being what? Aggressive. Although in the Western world, the victims of aggression, and things like licentious desires, right? Birth of a nation, right? The sex effect, the sexual deviant, right? With the insatiable appetite. Even speaking about black men's private parts and stuff like that as a stereotype. But where does that come from? These mythologies and these things don't just enter a society from thin air. They come from the world of academia, right? The thinkers, right? So listen, blackness becomes the container for white disavowed traits: violence, hypersexuality, danger, chaos, animality. The white subject maintains a sense of purity while disposing these unwanted impulses into black bodies. I definitely want us to have a look at the work in the near future. We have done before, and we will come back to, God willing, to look at Frantz Fanon, right? He makes some major contributions to this world of thinking, because methinks that we have to think our way out of the situation that we find ourselves in, socially, politically, economically. And just to link this into the mobiles, you're going to say, wow, how are you going to link that into the mobiles? Okay, the lady that put together the mobiles, right, she created a platform where black people in the UK could showcase their talent, and talent started to rise to the top because the talent was there. But it's interesting that it was in the field of entertainment and music. And we are still questioning, where is the intellectual think tank based on the black genius in the UK? Where is that think tank and that organization? Or where is that institute of learning and training? Or where is that institute that trains our political scientists that will go on to represent and hold office, right, in different black communities and different locales? Where is that institute that will train people in business and finance, black people, black young people in business and finance? So in other words, music is okay. It's not bad. It's not a bad thing. That template's a great thing, the mobile. Music of black origins, right? But what about business of black origin? What about financial structures of black origin? What about intellectual accomplishments of black origin? Yeah, what about centers of healing and homeopathy and traditional wellness techniques and practices of black origin? Where's those institutions? And I say where, meaning I'm putting it in the stratosphere, right? I'm putting it in the stratosphere that we would benefit from having those things also. I intend to conduct some research, and I want it to start in the four corners of London: north, south, east, and west, and it will involve focus groups, questionnaires, and interviews. I'm one person, right, with one pair of hands. Yeah, so I am going to be putting out my contact details. You can get me on emotionalinsight@hotmail.co.uk, or if you see any of my YouTube videos and you go in the comments, all my contact details are there. If not, you can contact me via the station. If you know any person that is interested or qualified or is a student of, in particular, not only, but based on anything related to mental health, into psychology, and wellness, and they want to be a part of the research, or they want to help with the research, then by all means, please contact me or pass the details on to the relevant individuals. But the research is going to be based on, like I said, focus groups, questionnaires, interviews, and the exploration is of politically activating our community. And what do we mean by this? What do we mean? Let me break this down. So what you have in the UK in pockets throughout the different cities, right? You have people who are activists, long-time activists, some of them too long, but, you know, long in the tooth, right? Been in the field. But there seems to be something about our community or communities up and down the country within the UK where there is a large percentage of people who are not politically, socially, politically, culturally activated. And what tends to happen is those who are active, out of frustration, speak pejoratively, disparagingly, and essentially put them down. They're blind, they're deaf, they're dumb, they're many different things. All right, I don't have the answer. That's the whole point. Is there something about the Black nationalist cause or the Afrocentric cause or the Pan-Africanist cause or just the, you know, I'm trying to say to you, Black upliftment, however we frame it and phrase it. But is there something about it that makes so many of our people either turn off or unactivated? So I want to conduct some research, and part of that process will be those who are active, those who are interested. The assignment is simple. Bring 2 members of your friendship circle, your family, right? Or colleagues or acquaintances, but bring 2, right? Who are specifically not from the activist world, not conscious, not switched on. That is the assignment, right? Because those are the people that will provide vital information, key information, right? In terms of the marketing campaign, in terms of the structure, in terms of how do we really put together a Black agenda for 2026 and beyond, and how we intend to roll that out so that those who are not involved can become ignited and attracted and interested to participate in that process. Because there's key bits of information, there's essential skills, right? There's resources that the community has that we're not making use of. And it's like to use the analogy of the football team, right? It's not just about having talent in the players, right? But how does the coach, right, bring that out of his team, right? If the team ain't playing to the level that they're capable of. And so I'm going to use that as an analogy. This ain't no game, but the team is not playing to their potential. So, yeah, a little bit of food for thought. But if anybody wants to get at me, you know, you can get at me through the station, and I will be putting out my details before the end of the show. But you definitely can email me on emotionalinsight@hotmail.co.uk if you are from a mental health background, wellness background, psychology background, counseling, anything of that nature in particular. Doesn't mean exclusive, but those are the primary people I'm looking to speak to first. Social workers, anybody, bricklayers, plumbers, everybody's welcome. But those are the people I'm trying to I want them to get at me first.
As much as I'm struggling to find the energy to say something new about white supremacy, we can't ignore it. Such a large part of Europe's moved to far-right extremities. See, Europe has produced a lot of greatness, but right now is struggling through a loss of status. Gone are the days of colonization. Now you're living in fear of foreign invasion. Now you look to China for modernization and struggle to assert yourselves as sovereign nations. Because you can't afford to disobey the US, so we're forced to constantly anticipate a new mess. House prices are getting out of hand, and you don't really see nobody setting out a plan. But what you do see is loads of brown faces. Mention this and you get told you sound racist. But on the news, they're coming in droves, and as everyone and their mother should know, the government's broke. This is the typical European crisis. There's millions of Europeans feeling like this. Like problems appeared when the jobs disappeared, and the jobs disappeared. But at the same time that we started getting these immigrant mobs living here. Same time, politics lost this veneer of competence. Remember the confidence years? Remember when you voted and your conscience was clear? I want to start by acknowledging your points. If you're not rich, you probably don't have a voice. And if your job costs less in another country, then it's going there. You don't have a choice. Personally, I think it's disingenuous to act like the situation isn't strenuous. But don't assume our predicaments ain't equal. We are being sabotaged by the same people. I'm not talking in riddles and metaphors when I say that your government was never yours, because your concerns fall out of focus whenever they're up against power brokers. Then people want to control government-owned assets, and when they get their goal, you're going to get no access. Imagine society sold, silently sold. Used to be for everyone, now it's privately owned. Energy, transport, housing, water, sold under your nose, bro. That's out of order, and your priority is locking down the border. You probably think colonialism is something that happened to someone else ages ago. Probably think it has nothing to do with you, because your ancestors were poor and they didn't know. But you're witnessing history taking its toll. Truth is, the system that Europe is built on still needs a class that is poorer to steal from. And now it's your turn. It's your turn to fight to survive in the short term. 0-hour contracts, job losses, more churn. It's your turn to have no leverage when negotiating your terms. Lessons that the colonies all learned. It's your turn to watch your elected officials change the constitution for a third and fourth term. It's your turn to watch them sell your country's assets, then disappear into consulting at some law firm. None of this has anything to do with immigrants. Race science got you confused and ignorant. It doesn't matter if an immigrant is super diligent. None of this was planned in rooms we're sitting in. See, a wise man once said, don't die for Nyash. In your case, Nyash is white guys with cash. You might like the brashness and the theatrics, but you're too poor to stay on the right side of fascists.
Wow, don't die for Nash. Yes, George the Poet dropping a bar. Absolutely, dropping a bar, absolutely. Yeah, there is some feedback in the chat suggesting that there are loads of them. As in when I was asking the rhetorical question about, or maybe it wasn't rhetorical, maybe it was interrogative. Maybe it was a question about where are all these associations which deal with intellectual pursuits and finance and business and other aspects of the black experience and politics. I'm sure there are some organizations that exist. I'm even aware of some, but I guess the nature of my rhetoric was they are less prominent. And is that purely because black people just like to sing and dance? Or is there other possible answers? Or is that the end of the story? We just like music. We like to dance, we focus on music, and that's the end of the story. Or is there a little bit more about promotion, about platforming, about relevance? And this is where I take an interest in doing this piece of research. North, South, East, and West, if successful, it'll roll out through the major cities throughout the UK. We're not excluding Manchester or Birmingham or Wolverhampton and the other places where we reside in larger numbers. But just saying that as a Londoner, we could start, dance a yard before you dance abroad type of situation, that's all. But yeah, there are those organizations, but they are low profile in contrast to something like the Mobos, which is an absolute institution. And I would invite you to do a thought experiment and say, if you was on an underground train and you used to approach every black face in your carriage and say, have you heard of the Mobos? And they would give you one answer, and you would say, have you heard of the Black Forum for Business or the Black Professorship of the Intellectual? We know we can use our thought, imagination, fantasy to say which we would expect them to know, possibly more than the other niche ones as well. So I guess that's what we're trying to push, is let's take the other things that we excel in that are very important for black life in the UK. Let's showcase that and make that more prominent as well. But there's a point made, it might sound a bit off, but if many black people don't come off with a street persona, they are often dismissed. I think that is that's a reasonable, or not reasonable, important point, that in some circles and in some spaces, there is there's a debate to be had about what constitutes as black. And some black people are absolutely black, right? In their mindset, their perspective, in terms of how they live their life. But they may just have a professional or educated or come from spaces where it wasn't street. They just been well brought up, or they just chose to navigate different spaces from the street life and the ends type of attitude. And yeah, there is an issue that sometimes black people who are like well spoken and come from a certain side of the train track, their blackness is kind of questioned if they don't have a ghetto edge. That's quite frustrating, and it's quite limiting. And you see that in for example in America, where you get artists or grown-ass men, right, who still have to act hood and say, I'm checking in with this because I'm going in this area. And like this stupid little childish type of ghetto-y type is kind of cringe, but it's because it's seen as authentically black. Sometimes leaning into sort of what is ghetto. Yeah, what is ghetto? Yeah, so that is an issue that sometimes black people from those spaces are dismissed. But also, I think that the opposite is also true as well. That sometimes black people who have been afforded chances to go in other spaces outside of the ghetto and outside of the ends, sometimes may struggle to take black people from road seriously, you know what I mean, and not have a little bit of disdain for them because of their maybe a little bit of rough around the edges. But that is a really interesting point. Appreciate your point, brother Joe. Appreciate your point. But yeah, getting down to our main topic for the day, and you remember the ECR chat is available. It's open. You can go in the ECR chat and leave a comment, ask a question, as you do as the conversation evolves. But yeah, we want to talk about Nasty Nigel, right? We want to talk about Nasty Nigel and him being back at it again. He can't help himself. Yeah, if you must have been living under a rock if you don't know about the murder of Henry Nowak, who was killed in December. He was murdered in December by another British young man. However, the young man is of Sikh descent, of Southeast Asian descent, who was a Sikh, and said that he was racially abused when his brother basically phoned the police after they had an altercation, and the Sikh guy basically stabbed him up, leading to the young Henry, unfortunately, to lose his life. And what makes it controversial and why it's hit the headline is because I don't think what happened is that controversial. I think it was inefficient. I think it was a tad unprofessional. It was wrong. It was a human error. It was poor policing. It was inexcusable, but it didn't cost the young man his life. The murderer cost the young man his life. But what made it controversial is the fact that Nasty Nigel has jumped on it. Yeah, has jumped on it. But I want to mentioned something called, a phrase called dog whistle politics. And dog whistle politics is basically the concept of a politician or public figure using coded language to direct often racially prejudiced or biased identity politics talking points to push agendas related to those things. But instead of using overt language which relates to race or sex or religion, certain other code words are exchanged or substituted, but to those in the know, it will mean and it will represent the same messaging, but it's just below the surface. I think they're using it from the analogy of like a dog whistle. When a dog, when people use dog whistles, the average human beings don't hear it because it's on a frequency that human beings don't hear, but dogs hear it. And likewise, when that type of racist language is used in a coded way, it's the idea is that, you know, people of decent people, you know, miss that message, right? But dogs hear it and react to it. Yeah. And so that's the word of the day, dog whistle politics. And that's different from blatant politics. So yeah, we got a politician from yesteryear, from the Conservative Party, Enoch, yeah, who did his thing many moons ago. I don't know if he could be accused. Well, you could accuse him of a lot of different things, but definitely not dog whistle politics.
Unwavering principle. Enoch Powell was the most controversial of Tory politicians before Margaret Thatcher. His devotees claimed he was a man of unwavering principle. His detractors, that he represented the respectable face of gutter politics. The former Wolverhampton MP himself says that the thread which runs through his life is his belief in the nation.
In this country, in 15 or 20 years' time, the black man will have the whip hand over the white man. Well, I can already hear the chorus of execration. How dare I say such a horrible thing? How dare I stir up trouble and inflame feelings by repeating such a conversation? My answer is that I do not have the right not to do so.
The issue of race was to bring Powell into confrontation with Heath. Powell decided to quote directly from the experiences with immigrants of his white constituents. Only parts of that polemical speech were filmed, but Powell has kept his original text. He began by attacking the Labour government's bill that outlawed racial discrimination.
The discrimination and the deprivation, the sense of alarm and of resentment lie not with the immigrant population, but with those among whom they have come and are still coming. This is why to enact legislation of the kind before Parliament at this moment is to risk throwing a match onto gunpowder.
Powell quoted a letter he said he'd received about an elderly widow living in Wolverhampton, the only white resident left in her street. He quoted from the letter, "She's becoming afraid to go out. Windows are broken. She finds excreta pushed through her letterbox. When she goes to the shop, she's followed by children, charming, wide-grinning piccaninnies. They cannot speak English, but one word they know, racialist, they chant."
Those whom the gods wish to destroy, they first make mad. We must be mad. Literally mad as a nation, to be permitting the annual inflow of some 50,000 dependents who are for the most part the material of the future growth of the immigrant descended population. It is like watching a nation busily engaged in heaping up its own funeral pyre.
Powell ended the speech with a quote from Virgil translated from Latin. As I look ahead, I'm filled with foreboding. Like the Roman, I seem to see the river Tiber foaming with much blood. It was that line, not filmed at the time, which gave the speech its Rivers of Blood title. As the storm broke in the press, the Times condemned it as an evil speech, and there were growing demands for Ted Heath to sack Powell from the shadow cabinet. And the Smithfield meat porters marched on Parliament with a petition.
There's 2,026 signatures there to say that Mr. Enoch's right, that we have the right to say who we like and who we don't like. This is not a racial problem. All we say is that we've got enough immigrants into the country and that no more should be allowed in.
Nobody had any idea of the effect that it would have. It touched the spring, a spring which vibrated in the hearts of millions of people in this country.
2,000 signatures in 2 days. Listen to the press. 88% of Slough people say they support Enoch Powell. 88% Slough people.
But I've achieved a good deal, and I hear my voice coming through in what is said, and I see myself being proved right. What I had to say about immigration, what I had to say about the nation, what I had to say about Europe was heard and is still echoing.
Does any of that ring a bell? Anti-Europe politician, right? Brexit, right? So we doing any comparisons, right? Anti-Europe politician was Powell, and his powerful oration, you know, he definitely was a good public speaker. I can see the benefits of a classic British grammar education or private education. Flipping out, like, you know what I mean? Like he put it together, even if his message was nasty, mean and malicious, but he did put it together well, and that's what we're focusing on. Even using the speech, the paraphrase of the last white resident in a street, right? You know, it creates the pending doom of a takeover, right? They can't speak English. The Pickaninnies can't speak English, but one thing they do know is racialist, as you know, they're smashing out the windows, etc. So he draws a brilliant picture. And there's something that we don't speak about enough of. I'm going to navigate it carefully. But definitely, honestly, this is a truth hour. Don't touch that dial. This is ECR Radio. If you want to make a comment, you can call me on 07826 115543. The phone line is open. But one of the things that we don't equate for, even in the argument of identity politics within the UK and the changing landscape and how much it's changing, and there's places which are not culturally recognizable as Britain anymore, and all these little wolf whistle politics, which basically meaning like there's too much people from outside or too much people of color, right, in the place. These type of things do not take into account something which is called white flight. You hear people from the far right, Tommy Robinson, right, and people of his ilk. I think him and Nigel are on the same coin. There's the heads and the tails. There's one in a suit, which people say Nigel Farage is just Tommy Robinson in a suit, right? Or Tommy Robinson is Nigel Farage in jeans and trainers and a Burberry jacket, right? Saying I'm from Luton, but they're basically the same. They're on the same coin, right? Working in tandem. But one of the things they don't equate for is white flight. We never really speak about that, do we? White flight, that like the idea that has happened in places like the UK, and it happens in cities in America, right? When people of color move in by choice, white people move out and get, some white people have that attitude, not white people in general, but some white people have that thing of, I want to get away from these people. I need to go to a vanilla town. I need to go to somewhere where it's more white. They leave by choice. But they don't really equate this in the conversation. They make out as if they're being, people are being pushed out. They even say like, people, they need to integrate. right? We want them to integrate, not take over. We want them to integrate. But they leave when people, they don't even stick around to do the integrating, to show what is Britishness is, or they don't invite, right, toward what is Britishness and British culture. And you do have to stop eating samosas. If you're serious about British culture, to all white indigenous people, if you are really serious, you do have to stop using seasoning or having jerk chicken or curry goat or samosas and things of that nature. You are really not serious about your position if you're going to go on a far right march and then fill your belly with Asian food. You know what I mean? At the nearest street food market in Waterloo before you march on to Trafalgar Square to say they're taking over. You got to be consistent. You got to be consistent. But yeah, so there's a lack of taking into account for white flight. But we got Enoch's speech, right? So we know what dog whistle politics is. But we wouldn't accuse Enoch. We could accuse him of lots of different things, right? But not dog whistle, right? So far, so good. So